What would you do if your family forced you to marry your half-sister's millionaire fiancé the moment he lost everything? Have you ever been the forgotten one in your family? The one who's always lived in someone else's shadow, while watching your sibling get everything handed to them on a silver platter? Elena Harper knew that feeling all too well. For 26 years, she watched her glamorous half-sister Victoria live the perfect life. Beauty, wealth, status, and now engagement to billionaire Damian Blackwood. Elena, she was just the artist nobody noticed, the daughter born from scandal. But when a devastating car accident left Damian blind and broken, Victoria couldn't handle having a damaged fiancé. So the Harper family made an unthinkable demand. Elena must take her sister's place and marry the man who'd lost everything. What Elena didn't know was that everything, including his blindness, was a test. Hello, my dear family. Welcome to Soul Thread Stories by T. I'm in a bind, and I need your help to ensure that I and my family can have enough food to eat and be able to pay our bills and mortgage. If you are not heartless and wicked, you will kindly subscribe and watch this story to the end. I would love it if you could also add a comment about your favorite part of the story. You are all I have, and God will bless you and your family. Thank you. Elena Harper had learned to become invisible in her own home. While Victoria commanded every room with her platinum blonde hair and designer gowns, Elena preferred the quiet corners of the Harper mansion, sketching portraits that captured truths people tried to hide. The Harper family fortune wasn't built on old money like everyone believed. Elena's father, Richard Harper, had clawed his way to wealth through a series of calculated business moves that left him owing favors to dangerous people. Victoria was his pride, legitimate, beautiful, marketable. Elena was his reminder of the affair that nearly destroyed his first marriage. Damian Blackwood was different from the usual entitled rich man who circled Victoria. At 35, he'd built his empire from nothing, starting as a construction worker and ending up as the owner of the largest development company on the East Coast. His hands still bore calluses from his early years, and his steel-gray eyes could read people like financial statements. The engagement party at the Harper estate was supposed to be Victoria's crowning moment. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over 200 guests, each one carefully selected to witness the union of Harper prestige and Blackwood power. Elena watched from the library balcony as Victoria floated to the crowd in her custom silk gown, accepting congratulations like a queen receiving tribute. But when Elena descended the marble staircase to refill her wine glass, something unexpected happened. Damian was standing alone near the French doors, studying a painting Elena had created, a portrait of the estate's gardens during a thunderstorm. The artist captured something most people miss, he said without turning around. This isn't just a pretty landscape. It's about surviving chaos. Elena's breath caught. No one had ever understood her work like that. You must be the mysterious Sister Victoria mentioned, Damian continued, finally facing her. She said you were shy. She didn't mention you were brilliant. For 20 minutes, they talked about art, about seeing beauty in broken things, about building something meaningful from nothing. Elena felt seen for the first time in years. She had no idea that conversation would seal her fate, because 3 months later, when Damian's world collapsed, the Harper family would use that connection against her in ways she never saw coming. That connection would prove to be prophetic in the most devastating way. 3 months after the engagement party, Damian was driving back from a late-night meeting with investors in the mountains. The deal he'd just closed would double his company's value. He was calling Victoria to share the news when his headlights caught the deer. The Toyota truck that hit him head-on was driven by a teenager texting his girlfriend. The impact crushed Damian's car like an accordion. When paramedics pulled him from the wreckage, he was unconscious, bleeding from a severe head injury that would change everything. Elena was painting in her studio when Victoria's scream echoed through the mansion. She found her half-sister collapsed in the foyer, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "He can't see," Victoria sobbed. "The doctors say the trauma damaged his optic nerves." "Damian is blind. Elena, completely blind." For 48 hours, Victoria didn't leave the hospital. She held Damien's hand, whispered reassurances, posted updates on social media about standing by her man. The engagement photos on her Instagram showed a devoted fiancé ready for anything. But on the third day, reality hit. Elena watched through the hospital room window as Victoria stared at Damien struggling to eat soup, fumbling with the spoon, his expensive suit replaced by a standard hospital gown. His commanding presence had been reduced to hesitant movements and careful questions about where things were placed. "I can't do this," Victoria whispered to Elena in the hallway. "Look at him. He's broken. How am I supposed to walk down red carpets with a man who needs help finding the bathroom?" "Victoria, he's the same person." "No, he's not." Victoria's voice cracked. "I fell in love with power, confidence, success. Not this. Mother needs to fix this." Mrs. Harper didn't waste time on sentiment. Within 24 hours, she'd researched Damien's medical condition, consulted with 3 specialists, and calculated the financial implications of a broken engagement. Elena found her mother in the library, surrounded by legal documents and insurance papers. "The Blackwood merger is worth $40 million to our family," Mrs. Harper said, without looking up. "Victoria's emotional breakdown doesn't change our contractual obligations." "Mother, you can't force Victoria to marry someone she doesn't want to." "You're right. I can't force Victoria." Mrs. Harper finally looked at Elena, her expression cold as winter steel. "But the marriage agreement doesn't specify which Harper daughter walks down the aisle." Elena's blood turned to ice. "The contract states a union between the Harper and Blackwood families. Victoria has made her choice. Now you need to make yours." Elena's hands trembled. "You're asking me to marry a man I barely know because Victoria doesn't want damaged goods?" "I'm asking you to save this family from financial ruin. Damien Blackwood still owns everything he built. His condition doesn't change that. The impossible choice was laid bare. Sacrifice herself or watch her family lose everything." Elena stared at her mother, the weight of an impossible decision crushing down on her shoulders. "You have 72 hours, Mrs. Harper continued, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany desk. "These are financial documents, showing what we stand to lose if the Blackwood deal falls through. Your father owes money to people who don't accept late payments." Elena opened the folder. The numbers made her stomach drop. Loans from private investors with interest rates that looked more like threats. Her father hadn't just borrowed money. He'd gambled the family's future on deals that required the Blackwood merger to survive. "What about Victoria's happiness? What about mine? Happiness is a luxury we can't afford right now." Mrs. Harper's voice was granite. "Victoria gets to walk away clean. You get to save everyone." That night, Elena sat in Damien's hospital room while he slept. Bandages covered half his face, and his breathing was still labored. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and built an empire now looked fragile under harsh hospital lighting. She studied his hands, those callous fingers that had once created something from nothing. Would those same hands ever touch her with love, or would this marriage be nothing but a business transaction wrapped in wedding vows? "I know you're there." Damien's voice was rough from medication. "Your perfume is different from Victoria's." Softer. "It's Elena." He turned toward her voice. "The artist. Why are you here?" Elena's throat tightened. "Victoria, she's having a difficult time processing everything." Damien's laugh was bitter. "She's gone, isn't she? Can't handle being engaged to a broken man." The honesty in his voice broke something inside Elena. She's confused. "And you? Are you here out of pity?" Elena looked at this man who'd lost everything. His sight, his fiancée, his certainty about the future. "No, I'm here because someone should be." 3 days later, Elena signed a marriage license in her father's study. No fanfare, no celebration. Just signatures on legal documents that would bind her life to a stranger's. The wedding ceremony took place in the Harper Mansion's small chapel. 20 guests watched Elena walk down the aisle in a simple ivory dress, not the elaborate gown Victoria had ordered from Paris. Damien stood at the altar in a dark suit, his hand resting on his best man's arm for guidance. When the minister asked if she took Damien to be her husband, Elena's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I do." Damien's response was steady, but she caught the tremor in his jaw. "I do." Their first kiss as husband and wife was awkward, formal. His lips were warm, but there was no passion, just obligation. The reception was even more subdued. Elena watched Victoria charm the guests, playing the supportive sister role perfectly, while avoiding any real conversation with the bride. Damien sat silent beside Elena, his untouched champagne glass a symbol of everything wrong with this arrangement. That night, in the guest wing of Damien's estate, they faced their new reality. Two strangers sharing space, sharing a name, sharing nothing else. "I won't pretend this is a love story," Damien said, standing near the window he couldn't see through. "We both know why we're here." Elena unpacked her suitcase, hand shaking. "I know." "Good. Then we understand each other." But as Elena lay in the king-size bed that night, listening to Damien's careful movements in the adjoining room, she wondered if understanding each other would be enough. Can you imagine being forced into a marriage like this? Drop a comment. Would you have made the same choice Elena did? What Elena discovered in those first weeks would change everything she thought she knew about love. Damien's estate felt like a fortress, cold marble floors, towering ceilings, and rooms so vast they echoed with loneliness. Elena watched him navigate his own home like a stranger, counting steps between furniture, his confidence replaced by careful hesitation. On the third morning, she found him in the kitchen, frustrated and dripping wet from spilled coffee. "Let me help," Elena said softly. "I don't need help." His voice was sharp, defensive. "I know you don't need it, but maybe you could use it." Something in her tone made him pause. Elena guided his hand to the coffee maker, showing the raised buttons he could feel instead of see. When he successfully poured his first cup without spilling, the small smile that crossed his face was worth more than any thank you. Elena began reading to him every evening. Not romance novels or feel-good stories, but business journals, market reports, the financial news that kept him connected to his work. Her voice became his link to the world he'd temporarily lost. "You have a beautiful voice," he told her one night as she finished reading quarterly earnings reports. "It's like warm honey." Elena's cheeks flushed. "That's the first personal thing you've said to me. I'm not good at personal anymore. Maybe you just need practice." Slowly, carefully, their conversations grew deeper. Damien shared stories about building his company, about growing up with nothing, about the fear that consumed him when darkness became his reality. Elena talked about her art, about feeling invisible in her own family, about the weight of always being second choice. "You're not second choice to me," Damien said one evening, his voice rough with emotion. "You're the only choice that makes sense." 2 months into their marriage, a violent storm hit the coast. Power lines snapped, plunging the estate into darkness. The backup generator failed, and Elena found Damien standing in the living room, completely disoriented. "We need to get to the cabin," she said, taking his hand. "It has a working fireplace." The cabin was a quarter-mile through the woods, a place Damien had built for weekend retreats. Elena guided him through the rain, their clothes soaked through by the time they reached shelter. Inside, Elena built a fire while Damien sat on the couch, listening to her movements. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and for the first time since the accident, he seemed at peace. "I can feel the warmth," he said. "Tell me what you see." Elena sat beside him, close enough to feel his body heat. "The fire is gold and orange like liquid sunset. The wood cabin feels cozy, intimate, safe. And you? What do you look like right now?" Elena's breath caught. "My hair is damp from the rain. I'm wearing a white sweater that's probably see-through now." Damien's hand moved slowly, finding her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone, her jawline, learning her features through touch. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "I don't need to see you to know that." When he kissed her, it wasn't a formal peck from their wedding. This kiss was hungry, desperate, full of months of unspoken longing. Elena melted into him, her hands exploring the strong muscles of his shoulders, the warmth of his neck. "Elena," he breathed against her lips, "I want to touch you. All of you." She took his hands, placing them on her waist. "Then touch me." What happened next was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Damien's hands became his eyes, memorizing every curve, every sensitive spot that made her gasp. He peeled away her damp sweater with reverent care, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin that felt like worship. "You're trembling," he whispered. "Good trembling," she managed. He laid her back on the soft fur rug by the fire, his mouth following the path his hands had mapped. Elena arched beneath him, her fingers tangling in his dark hair, pulling him closer. When he whispered her name like a prayer, she knew this wasn't just physical desire. It was a moment two lonely souls found each other. Their bodies moved together with a rhythm that seemed ancient, primal. Elena guided him with soft touches and breathless whispers, showing him how to love her without sight, but with complete trust. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, they created their own heat, their own sanctuary. Later, wrapped in Damien's arms before the dying fire, Elena felt something she'd never experienced. Complete belonging. But Victoria was watching from the main house, her jealousy transforming into something dangerous. The next morning, Victoria cornered Elena in the kitchen. "Enjoying playing house with my leftovers?" "He was never yours," Elena replied quietly. "We'll see about that." Victoria's threat would prove more prophetic than Elena realized, because the man she'd fallen in love with was hiding the biggest secret of all. For the past month, Damien had been experiencing something miraculous and terrifying. Shadows were becoming shapes. Blurred outlines were sharpening into recognizable forms. His vision was returning slowly but steadily. The doctors had warned this might happen. The trauma to his optic nerves wasn't permanent, they'd said, but recovery could take months and might never be complete. Damien had chosen not to share this possibility with anyone, not Victoria during their engagement, and certainly not Elena after their marriage. At first, he told himself he was protecting her from false hope. But as his sight improved and he watched Elena care for him with such genuine devotion, a darker truth emerged. He wanted to know if her love was real. Every morning, Damien pretended to fumble for his coffee cup while secretly observing Elena's face. He watched her patient smile when he accidentally knocked over a glass. He saw her tears when she thought he wasn't looking, tears she shed for his pain. But he also saw something else. The way she bloomed in his presence, how her confidence grew as she realized her worth. Elena was becoming the woman she was meant to be, and part of him wondered, would she still want him if she knew he'd been watching her transformation? The morning everything changed. Elena was in her garden studio, painting their cabin by the lake. Damien approached silently, no longer needing his walking stick, drinking the sight of her loss in her art. "It's beautiful," he said, startling her. Elena turned, paintbrush in hand. "How did you know I was painting?" "I can smell the oils." "What are you working on?" She described the canvas in detail. The cabin where they'd made love, the storm clouds clearing to reveal golden sunlight. As she spoke, Damien realized she was describing exactly what he could see. "Elena," he said carefully, "step back from the easel." "Why?" "Just please." Elena moved 3 feet to her left. Damien's eyes tracked her movement perfectly. The paintbrush slipped from Elena's fingers, clattering onto the stone path. "How long?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Damien's careful facade crumbled. 6 weeks. Maybe longer. 6 weeks. Elena's face went white. "You've been able to see for 6 weeks, and you said nothing?" "Elena, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you watched me fall in love with you while you were testing whether I was genuine enough." Her voice rose, raw with betrayal. That every tender moment, every intimate conversation, every time I helped you navigate your own home was part of some cruel experiment. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Damien? Tears streamed down her face. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided to find out if I was different from Victoria by lying to me for over a month. Damien reached for her, but Elena stepped back as if his touch would burn. I was protecting myself, he said desperately. Victoria left the moment things got difficult. I needed to know if you would too. So you tested me. Elena's laugh was hollow, broken. You watched me pour my heart out to you, watched me sacrifice everything for this marriage, watched me fall in love with you, and you were testing me the entire time. I love you, Elena. That's not fake. Love. Elena's eyes blazed with fury and hurt. Love doesn't require tests, Damien. Love doesn't involve deception and manipulation. What you did, what you put me through, that's not love. That's control. She turned toward the house, then stopped. You want to know the worst part? I would have loved you just the same if you'd told me the truth. But now I'll never know if anything between us was real, because it was all built on your lie. Elena walked away, leaving Damien standing alone in the garden, finally seeing clearly but having lost the only thing that mattered. For the first time since his accident, Damien understood what true blindness felt like. What Damien did next would either save his marriage or destroy it completely. For 3 days, Elena refused to speak to him. She moved into the guest wing, ate her meals alone, and locked her studio door. Damien could hear her crying at night through the walls, soft, heartbroken sobs that cut through him like glass. On the 4th day, he found a note on his desk. I'm staying at my parents' house for a while. I need space to think. Damien drove to Harper Estate that afternoon, his vision clear, but his purpose clouded by desperation. Mrs. Harper answered the door with a cold smile. Elena doesn't want to see you. Then I'll wait. She could be upstairs for hours. Then I'll wait for hours. Victoria appeared behind her mother, perfectly dressed as always. This is pathetic, Damien. You had your chance to be with me, the right sister, and you chose a charity case instead. Elena is worth 10 of you, Damien replied without looking away from the staircase. He waited for 4 hours. When Elena finally came down, her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. What do you want? To apologize, to explain, to beg for another chance. I've heard your explanations. Not all of them. Damien pulled out a small velvet box. I bought this 2 weeks after our marriage, when I realized I was falling in love with you for real. Elena stared at the engagement ring. Not the massive diamond Victoria would have demanded, but vintage sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated. I was going to propose to you properly, Damien continued, not as part of a business arrangement, but because I chose you, because you chose me when no one else would. But you kept lying to me, because I was a coward, because I've been abandoned before and I couldn't survive it happening again. Elena's composure cracked slightly. So you made sure you controlled the narrative. Yes, and I was wrong. 2 weeks later, the annual Harper Foundation Charity Gala filled the ballroom with the city's elite. Elena attended reluctantly, staying close to the walls, avoiding both Damien and Victoria's circles. But then Damien took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a confession to make. His voice carried across the room, silencing conversations. 3 months ago, I lost my sight in a car accident. What I haven't told anyone is that my vision returned 6 weeks ago. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Elena froze near the dessert table. I kept this secret because I wanted to test the people in my life. I wanted to know who would love me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Damien's eyes found Elena in the crowd. I tested my wife, Elena, in the cruelest way possible. I watched her sacrifice everything for a marriage she never wanted, watched her care for me with genuine love, watched her become the most beautiful woman I've ever known, and I let her believe I couldn't see any of it. The room was dead silent. Elena Harper Blackwood, Damien continued, his voice breaking, you deserved honesty from the beginning. You deserved to know that when I married you, I was getting the better deal. You saved me in ways that had nothing to do with my eyesight. You made me remember what it feels like to be human. Elena's hands trembled as tears ran down her cheeks. I know I broke your trust. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway, in front of everyone who matters to us, because hiding from you was the biggest mistake of my life. Victoria stood frozen by the champagne fountain, her face flushed with humiliation as every guest turned to stare at her. The woman who'd abandoned her fiancé in his darkest hour was being exposed while her sister was being honored as a true partner. She's just a backup plan, Victoria hissed the woman beside her, but her voice carried in the silence. Actually, Damien said from the stage, she was always a plan. I just didn't know it yet. Elena walked slowly toward the stage, the entire ballroom watching. When she reached Damien, she looked up into his eyes that could see her clearly now. You hurt me, she said softly. I know. You made me question everything I felt. I know. But you also taught me something important. Elena's voice grew stronger. I learned that I'm not the forgotten daughter anymore. I'm not the backup plan or the consolation prize. I'm Elena Blackwood, and I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She took the microphone from his hands. I forgive you, Damien, not because you deserve it, but because love isn't about deserving. It's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. The ballroom erupted in applause as Damien pulled Elena into his arms, kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. 6 months after that night, the Blackwood estate had become something nobody expected, a home filled with genuine laughter. Elena converted the East Wing into an art therapy center, teaching painting to children from broken homes. Damien used his business connections to fund scholarship programs for kids who reminded him of his younger self, hungry, determined, and overlooked by society. You realize we're creating something beautiful together, Elena said one morning, watching Damien help a 10-year-old boy named Marcus learn to read financial statements. Finally, Damien smiled, his hand finding hers naturally, something that matters. Their physical connection had deepened too, but now it was built on complete honesty. When Damien traced Elena's face with his fingertips, it wasn't because he couldn't see her. It was because he wanted to memorize every detail. When Elena whispered, I love you in the darkness, it wasn't out of obligation, but out of choice. The difference between now and before, Elena told him one night as they lay tangled in silk sheets, is that before I was trying to be enough for you. Now I know I already am. You were always enough, Damien replied, his lips against her neck. I just needed to become worthy of you. But the real transformation happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Elena was in her studio, working on a painting of a lake, when she heard familiar voices from the garden. Victoria had returned. Through the window, Elena watched her half-sister approach Damien with her calculated smile, her designer dress, her practiced charm. The old Elena would have felt that familiar stab of insecurity. Instead, she felt pity. Damien, Victoria purred. I've been thinking about us, about what we could have been. Damien didn't even look up from the financial reports he was reviewing. Victoria, I'm married to my sister. We both know that was just circumstances. No, Damien said, finally meeting her eyes. That was the best decision I ever made. Elena smiled, returning to her painting. She didn't need to interfere, didn't need to fight for what was already hers. Victoria's power had always been in making others doubt themselves. Elena no longer doubted anything. Later that evening, Elena and Damien sat on the dock behind their house, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded Elena of their first night in the cabin. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd married Victoria? Elena asked. Damien considered this seriously. I would have been successful, wealthy, probably miserable. I would have had a wife who loved my money, my status, my connections, everything except me. And now I have a wife who saw me at my worst and chose to love me anyway, who built me up instead of breaking me down, who turned a business arrangement into something real. Elena leaned against his shoulder. You know what I learned from all this? What? Love isn't about being chosen first. It's about being chosen completely. Victoria was your first choice, but I was your final choice, the one that mattered. Damien kissed the top of her head. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone who meets your requirements. It's about finding someone who makes you want to become better than you are. As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Elena reflected on how far they'd traveled, from a forced marriage to a genuine partnership, from testing each other to trusting each other, from surviving together to thriving together. Ready to go home? Damien asked. Elena looked at the house that had once felt like a prison and now felt like a sanctuary. I am home. This story began with a family forcing Elena to marry a man she barely knew. It ends with a woman who discovered her own worth through the most unexpected journey. Elena Harper started as a forgotten daughter, living in her half-sister's shadow, accepting scraps of attention and affection. But when life forced her into an impossible situation, she didn't just survive, she transformed. She learned that being second choice does make you second best. Sometimes it makes you the final choice, the one that actually matters. Damien Blackwood learned an even harder lesson. He thought love could be tested, that he could control the narrative of his relationships through manipulation and secrecy. But real love doesn't survive tests. It survives truth. When he finally stopped hiding behind his fear and chose vulnerability over control, he didn't just get his sight back. He got his life back. Victoria represents something we've all encountered. People who love you for what you can do for them, not for who you are. She wanted Damien's power, his status, his connections. The moment he couldn't provide those things, she disappeared. That's not love. That's a transaction. But here's what makes this story powerful. Elena didn't win because she was better than Victoria. She won because she chose to love when it was difficult, stayed when it was hard, and forgave when it was costly. She proved that authentic love isn't about perfection. It's about commitment. The biggest lesson? Your family's expectations don't define your worth. Mrs. Harper saw Elena as expendable, a tool to fix her family's financial problems. Elena could have internalized that message and lived her entire life believing she was a backup plan. Instead, she realized that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most, and that's their failure, not yours. Damien's test revealed something crucial. You can't build genuine relationships on deception, even when that deception comes from fear. Trust isn't earned through manipulation. It's earned through consistency, honesty, and choosing to be vulnerable even when it's terrifying. In the end, Elena and Damien created something neither of them had experienced before. A partnership based on seeing each other clearly and choosing to stay anyway. They turned a business arrangement into a love story, a forced marriage into a chosen family. Their estate became a place of healing not just for them, but for others who needed to believe that broken things can be made beautiful again. If this story touched your heart, smash that subscribe button for more incredible tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. What lesson hit you the hardest? Share in the comment below. I read every single one. Remember, you're not the backup plan in your own life. You're the main character.